coaches, this is Stacy. I'm here with Allie and we are on week 2 of setting yourself up for a successful day. This week, we are helping our gymnasts learn the difference between a circumstance or a fact and a thought, helping them separate out what those are, and then figuring out other thoughts they could think instead that might be more useful to them. So, Allie, you want to take it away?
Yeah. Okay. I'm actually going to start by telling a not gymnastics story to help you understand where I'm going to go with this. And then Stacy, I'm going to call on you to kind of help relate it to gymnastics. But I always start this way. First of all, if you didn't listen to last week's, I would totally listen to last week's because this is a good build on what to do next, because they can still do the thought download and then move on learning how to separate their C versus T. So definitely start with last week's episode to kind of understand the brain. And then you're going to move on to this. So I like to talk about this story. I was in Arizona and I was hiking. I love hiking. I love traveling. And I was actually pretty young when this happened, like 12 maybe. But to be honest, it probably wouldn't have been any different like 5 years ago. So it's fine. So we're hiking and there is a big group of people like standing off the path, like circled, like looking at something. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, blah, blah, blah. And of course, I'm 12. I'm like, oh, what is it? And I go running over there. I mean, who else would do that, right? Like, you want to know what it is. Of course, it's probably a cool animal. So I get over there and I'm quicker than most of my family because high energy gymnast, right? And I get over there and I freeze and I start bawling, like absolutely bawling. And my whole family is like, what is happening? Because there's a group of people like totally happy. And then I'm like traumatized. And they were like, they thought I got hurt at first. They didn't know what was going on. So then they come over and you guys, can you guess what this is? Most people guess a rattlesnake because I'm in Arizona, but not quite. It's a tarantula. And so fun fact, even like the spider brand, like ski jackets, like when there's a spider on it, I used to in school literally put sticky notes over them so I didn't have to look at them because I would like cry. So to see a tarantula in like the wild was like so overwhelming to me. And my dad ended up picking me up and carrying me past this tarantula. And then my entire hike home, of course, I was like on scan, like, what if the tarantula moved? What if there's another tarantula? Is the tarantula still there? I don't know what's going to happen. Where's it going to come from? I was like in this full anxiety, didn't get to enjoy the rest of my hike, which I love hiking. So that was kind of a bummer. But this seems like a simple question. But Stacy, if I were to ask you, what was I afraid of? What would you say? If you didn't know our tools.
The tarantula.
The tarantula. But here's the deal, you guys. If I was actually terrified of the tarantula itself, then every single one of those people that was standing around that tarantula would have been terrified. They would have been like, you're afraid, you're afraid, you're afraid. And the tarantula would have had the ability to do that at every single one of them. And that's just not the case. Some psychotic people, in my opinion, I'm just saying. I mean, I'm better with spiders, but I still don't like love them, but I can kill one occasionally now. But anyways, they like study them, right? They have them as pets. There's a thing as a pet tarantula. They're in schools. I mean, some people just think they're like kind of but like they're fine. And then there's people like me that have like full, panic attacks. It's fine. But if it was the tarantula itself, we would all feel exactly the same, but we didn't. And why didn't we? Because our thoughts are what create our feelings. So the tarantula in this situation is the circumstance. Everybody in the world can look at it and agree it is a tarantula. That is a fact. Okay. Circumstance, fact. Then all of us had different thoughts. Some of the things that I said, some of the other people were saying were like, look, that's so cool. So they think it's kind of cool. So they're feeling interested maybe. Okay. Some of people were like, kind of like would look and be like, oh, and they kind of like walk by like, nice, but they feel neutral maybe like, oh, it's a spider. Some people were like me, and my thought was, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. I don't know how to get out of this situation. This is the worst thing in the entire world that could ever happen to me. And I had way worse than fear. What's the worst thing? Why can't I think of the emotion, Stacey?
Terrified.
Terrified. Yes. So I had that feeling of terrified. So moving on, when you have this thought download, you have tons and tons and tons and tons of thoughts that are making you feel all sorts of different ways in just one or two different circumstances. The circumstances from that story was I went on a hike, I saw a tarantula, I came back down. Like maybe my dad carried me past the tarantula. Okay. Yeah. Like those are like the facts, right? If I told the story without my thoughts, that's what it is. If I told you the story that way, you would have been like, okay, cool. You're lame. Right. But all the thoughts is what created that emotion and that attachment. And so your thoughts about the circumstances is what creates the stories you're telling yourselves and the feelings that you're having from it. So Stacey, let's wrap this in and bring it back to gymnastics quick. How can you use these tools to help in a more gymnastics type scenario?
Yeah. So your gymnast thinks that they're afraid of the beam. Your gymnast thinks that they're afraid of their dismount. Your gymnast thinks that they're afraid of whatever the skill is, or your gymnast thinks that it's the competition, that it's the circumstance that's causing them to feel whatever they're feeling. But it's not. It's their thought about the circumstance. And so what we want them to do every day is to do these thought downloads and then to determine the difference between which of the things are actually circumstances, they're facts that everyone would agree upon, and which of the things are their thoughts. Because they can't change the beam. They can't change the fact that it's 4 inches wide, or 4 feet off the ground, or the bar, or the vault, or the floor, but they can, or the skill. I mean, we can decide to do different skills, but sometimes, but yeah, for a compulsory, we can't. And so, but they can change their thought about it. And when they realize that it's their thought that's causing them to feel what they're feeling, then, we can, when it's their thought that's causing them to feel what they're feeling, then they can do something about it.
Yeah.
If they want to. But the first step is being able to realize it's just a thought. It's not a fact. Mm-hmm. So Allie thinks it's a fact that tarantulas are terrifying. Mm-hmm. And she'll never be able to change that thought as long as she continues believing that it's a fact. Mm-hmm. So the only way that Allie could make any progress on her fear around the spider is to be able to understand that her thought that the tarantula is terrifying is just a thought and not a fact. Mm-hmm. So the exercise we have them do this week, do their thought download, circle the circumstances, underline the thoughts, mm-hmm. and then just take one of those thoughts and notice every time they're thinking it and tell themselves, oh, I noticed that I'm thinking. I noticed that I'm thinking the beam is scary. I noticed that I'm thinking my series is scary. I noticed that I'm thinking, I don't know that I can do this. I noticed that I'm thinking, and just start telling themselves, oh, I noticed that I'm thinking. And that will help their brain begin to loosen up the idea that this is a fact. And instead, their brain eventually will get to the point where they believe it's just a thought. And then there will be space to change it. Because you guys have tried this before, to do thought swapping or to get a kid to like not be afraid of a skill. And it's just like, it feels impossible. Well, the reason it's impossible is because they believe it's a fact. And the first step is they've got to get to the point where they believe it's just their thought. And if they want to, they could choose to think something different. Mm-hmm. So we have them work on that all week, where it's just a thought, and they work on that. And then we have them come up with other thoughts they could think if they wanted to. Allie, you want to talk about that?
Okay, this is actually something that I like because they think it's a fact. They are really narrow focused on what people could think about it. And so I like to have them take, so like Stacy said, they have one thought that maybe they just say, I noticed that I'm thinking the beam is scary. Okay. And so then I have them take that circumstance. So the circumstance is just the beam, right? The thought is the beam is scary. And I have them write like up to 20 different thoughts that they could have about the beam. Doesn't mean that they have them now or that they believe them, but that they could have. And I try and make them be in a variety. So like maybe they start with a bunch of the negative thoughts. Like the beam is high off the ground. I might get hurt. I might split the beam. It's a really stupid event. I wish I didn't have to do it, blah, 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 right? All their negative thoughts. Then I kind of get them neutral. Like the beam is an event in gymnastics. The beam is 4 inches wide. The beam is, could be, I could think similar things about beam as I do about bars, like just some different things like that, where it's just a little bit more neutral of like factual about it. And then maybe a little more positive. And sometimes that one's hard and you have to like tap into like, what's an event you actually like? And they'll be like floor. And you're like, why do you like floor? Well, it's super fun. I like to flip. I like to go upside down. And I'm like, oh, can you say that same stuff about beam? And they're like, I guess I could. So flipping is fun on the beam. I like to go upside down and all the things. And so the point of it is you don't have to think any of these things. It's just that these are all options and they're all laid out for you. And so people are, it helps them be more open-minded about like what they could think and open-minded about making that change. So all you want to do at this point, you're not trying to get them to go to I love beam because that's going to be like a big jump, but just like allow them to see all the options. There's all these more negative options. There's some neutral options. There's maybe a little bit more positive options. Like just check out what you could think. And then maybe we'll be able to move from there next week. But right now, that is going to be a great place where they start feeling like they have the power to decide how they want to feel about things. And honestly, that's what I did about spiders. I went to like, a spider's also a bug. I have killed bugs before. Maybe it's possible I could kill a spider. And I literally still do that, you guys, when I see spiders. I'll like see, and like, it'll be like a tiny little spider on the wall. And I'll be like, and I'll be like, okay, I'm only freaking out because I think that there's no possible way to get rid of it because I can't kill it. But spiders are bugs. I've killed bugs. It's possible for me to maybe kill this bug. So what can I get to kill it that I'm far enough away from it to not tell that it has 8 legs? And then I kill it though. It might take a little extra time, but I do it. And so it's just kind of fun to see how this can play out in different ways in your life. It doesn't have to just be gymnastics. If you have any phobias, feel free, try it out. But
I was terrified of spiders until I moved to Florida. And then we had cockroaches this big that could fly.
Yeah. No.
And all of a sudden, spiders don't bother me at all anymore. But to kill a cockroach, I have to like, oh, what's that old movie where he's like
mm-hmm. Yeah,
and screaming at the same time. So that's what I do with the spray. I go and I scream as I flit with the spray from afar.
Oh yeah, sometimes I just Windex them till they die. Yep, that's a thing I do. It's a good time, but I can stand far enough away with the Windex. One time I flooded the shower. My husband was not as happy about that one. But it was in the shower. What else am I going to do? So I started I turned the thing and I was like drowning it. And I was so proud of myself. And I step out and it's literally like all water in my bathroom. I was like, and I was like, Tyler, I killed a spider. But the bathroom's flooded. He was like, oh my gosh. So anyways, sorry. Get to know us a little bit.
That's why it's conversations with coaches.
Try and do your thought downloads, pick out the circumstances, notice the thoughts that you're having, and maybe give yourself lots of different optional thoughts to look at just to keep your mind open to the fact that it is a thought and not a fact, and give yourself some options for the future.
Yeah. And honestly, just like a gymnastics skill, this takes practice and it takes work because your brain like builds neural pathways, and those neural pathways are fairly set. And so to get your brain to use a different one, you have to practice using the new one. And so this new one is that circumstance is just a thought. And so to even get your brain to begin to believe that, you have to practice it. And that's why we ask the gymnasts to start getting into this habit during the summer of actually doing it every day. Mm-hmm. Because it like having them do one time, go, oh, you know, the beam is I notice that I'm thinking that my flight series is scary. Like that won't change that neural pathway. They have to practice that again and again and again until the actual neural pathway changes and their brain goes, oh, it's just a thought. And then they can start being open to thinking other things. And it works, but it takes practice. And so that's why we're asking them this summer to do it every single day so that way they can get, see some progress in it. So, all right, next week, we are going to move on again, giving a new tool every single week to help with different circumstances. So we'll see you guys next week.